Avid Knits podcast. My name is Sarah, and you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry both as Avid Knits. Today is January 25th. It is a Monday. It is gray and cloudy and gross, and 70 here in Houston. That's supposed to change in the next couple of days, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, so it's the 25th. Yesterday was my birthday, so I am officially 35. Woohoo! And yeah, it's been a while since I podcast. It's only been a couple of weeks, but I don't have a whole lot to talk about. I'm trying to balance out podcasting regularity versus objects to show. And I'm kind of light on content today. So this one's going to be a little bit more chatty if you are okay with sticking around for that. Notable happenings in the last couple of weeks. Inauguration happened, and so we have welcomed the Biden-Harris administration into the White House, and I'm super happy about that. The inauguration was beautiful. If you watched it, I'm sure that you were very moved, as most of us were, by Miss Amanda Gorman's recitation of her poem, The Hill We Climb. I thought that was a very, very powerful message to have spoken at an inauguration for our first Black South Asian female vice president, which was absolutely fantastic. I know that all of you have seen the Bernie's mittens memes, I'm sure. So I feel like there was a lot more warmth and playfulness in our politics and in our political arena than we have seen in many a year. And I think that, especially with Bernie's mittens, I feel like that was something that people just ran with, just a little piece of fun and hope and silliness that we could use to welcome in the new administration. So I will ask that, yes, the inauguration was a very, very big moment. The new administration is looking to be much more conscientious in its decisions, and President Biden has already made a lot of steps towards rectifying or reversing or reinstating or implementing mandates and agreements and causes, and I'm super, super excited to hear that and to see it. No matter how relieved we may be that the Biden-Harris administration is now in place and how hopeful we may be for it, they are not infallible, and so that I hope that you will continue to keep them accountable as you kept 45 and his minions accountable. The Trump administration was not the cause of the division in our country, but it was a symptom of the problems that our country is suffering from. So I hope that you will continue to battle white supremacy at every turn that you can in this new administration as well, because it will not disappear overnight. And a lot of the previous administration, there is a very decided lack of accountability for the people who were involved in that administration and any insurrection and all of those things. So please don't stop. It's not the time to stop. It's the time to take a breath and to perhaps feel a little bit of hope when you look forward, but it is not the time to stop. As with most podcasts, you will find some links down below. I hope that you'll check them out. They will, as always, lead you to resources that are working to dismantle white supremacy and to better the equity and equality in our nation, and or to just help people who need it. So I hope that you'll always check down there. Other than that, I have a lot of just kind of chatter. So really quick, I'll talk about my knitting so that we can get that out of the way. And then the rest of it will just be chit chat, I guess. I finished the body of my husband's Redford. This is the Redford Sweater. I believe it's by Julie Hoover. I'll correct that on the screen if I'm wrong. I get this one and Sawyer mixed up a lot for some reason. I think Sawyer was Julie Hoover. Maybe they both are. See, I'm doing it. Who cares, right? It's on the screen. This is originally knit in pieces. So you had a front panel, a back panel, and then 2 sides panels that come up the underarms. And whenever you seam it together, you do so in a way where it almost creates an exposed seam, like a 3D seam on the outside. So it's supposed to look like an old vintage sweatshirt that you flipped inside out maybe. But my husband didn't care for that look. And honestly, purling aggravates my hands and arms really badly. I didn't feel like doing that. So I knit it in the round to the armholes, and I just used a purl bump to create like a faux seam detail. And then whenever I don't remember where it was when you saw it last, around here maybe. So then I got to the armholes and I separated. This did have to get knit flat, but that's okay. It was a few inches on each side. I'm hoping you can see it because I'm not sure what you can see and what you can't. But there is a little purl stitch V right here at the neckline as a little detail and an homage to the old school sweatshirts or whatever. Yeah, so I finished the body. The body's been done for a few days. I did start a sleeve. My husband does not... He wanted some customizations on it, some modifications to the pattern, which I was happy to do. But it took me a little bit longer to kind of get the math going the way that I needed to. On the original Redford, there is no ribbing at all. So whenever you start the bottom, you just go straight into the stockinette. I was worried that that would roll. I know that I could have blocked it out, but I just didn't want to fight with it. So I did a stockinette hem and just doubled it. I just folded it over and then kept going. So this is doubled. And I asked my husband if he wanted me to replicate that on the sleeves and the neckline, and he said no. He said he wanted ribbing. So on the original Redford, you are supposed to start, just cast on and then start with your stockinette. And you are supposed to have increased like 3 times by the time that I got to here, by the time I got to the top of the cuff. Well, since he wanted a cuff, I am 8 stitches smaller than what I was supposed to be for my cast on for the sleeve. It's a relatively wide sleeve and he didn't want that. He wanted it closer. So now I'm missing 8 stitches here. And I haven't increased it all until I've gotten here. So now I have to figure out a way to get 11 increases into the body of the arm using the same measurements. I think I've managed. It calls for, 7 increases less than what I'm planning on doing. I am roughly halfway through the length of the arm, and at first I was like, there's no way. But then I put it on my arm. My husband has longer arms than I do, obviously. And if I'm roughly halfway, then that would put me about here with my fabric whenever I'm halfway through it. So if that's the case, this will be like that. And then here, I have to have increases done here because then I start working flat and I'll do the shoulder cuff and that will be done flat so that I can seam it into this piece here. So eventually these 2 pieces will meet, but my tube for my sleeve is only going to go to about here. Like it'll go wherever the underarm meets, you know what I mean? So the other 6 inches or 7 inches, whatever this ends up being, I don't even know, however long this ends up being, the rest of this will just be the shoulder cap. So my tube for my sleeve is actually not going to be all that long, so that should be done here pretty quickly. I don't know what's taking me so long with this, you guys. Realistically, my husband's going to wear it 2 or 3 times a year probably, and I'm going to wear it through the whole summer when the AC is on because it's really cozy. And it's Brooklyn Tweed Loft. So it's a Targhee Columbia blend done here in the US, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's really, really light, and it's super cozy and comfortable. I wear my Bronwyn, which is that purple cable sweater that I have. That's knit in Shelter, which is the worsted weight version of this, and I wear that all the time, and I'm never hot. It does a really, really great job at regulating your temperature and just keeping you comfortable. So I'm sure that I'm going to steal this all the time. So basically I am knitting myself a sweater and I don't know why it's taking so long. I really love it. I don't know what is going. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I put it in the intro. We finished painting my cabinets this week. So, it really wasn't as big of a job as I thought it would be. We sanded everything down, we primed everything, we did 2 coats of paint. So I have gone from having a pine wood kitchen in my otherwise gray house with white trim. And I now have a white kitchen, so it blends much better with the style of home that I have. It looks a whole lot nicer. It makes my countertops pop really well. It looks very clean. The only downside to it now is that I have white appliances from when the previous owners had built the home. And they are 15 years old. It is time to go ahead and start thinking about replacing them. I'm starting to have a couple of issues, like with the dishwasher and the oven. The oven locks on me all the time. I don't know what's going on. I know that is something that it does whenever grease or something gets onto the coil, or when something gets caught on fire in your oven. I know it's a safety precaution, but that's not happening, and it's just randomly doing it. I've been self-cleaning I've been using the self-clean function and double checking behind it really, really regularly over the last 4 or 5 months. And I've still had 3 different meals get locked in and then completely burned. And they are on pans. They are not on racks or anything. Like, there's no reason for this. But we have had to have emergency takeout nights a few times in the last couple of months, and it's frustrating. Thankfully, we live in a food city, and so that works out for us. But it's still frustrating, it's waste. It's very wasteful, and I'm not a fan. Anyway, all that to say that we are coming up on needing to change out appliances pretty shortly, within the next year or so, and we will probably go ahead and just get that done. When we purchased our house, most of my house is still original. It was built in 2005. It's not old, but it is old enough where, in another 5 years, you need to start keeping an eye on the roof, because in the next 5 years or so, you're going to have to start thinking about that. I'm sure it's a 30-year roof, but, we live in hurricane area, so just checking, maintenance kind of stuff. I do have... My master bath has a stand-up shower, and the framework around it is just... It's just old. It's old, and it's... things aren't sitting as well as they should, or, you have a lot of... you start to have that buildup where you realize, oh, this looks really pretty when you first build it, but it's a pain in the butt to clean, or it attracts mold or whatever, that just needs to be completely ripped out. We have a couple of, not plumbing issues, but I have some water pressure issues on occasion, like where the water pressure just doesn't work. So I think there's something up with the faucet that needs to be replaced, but that's behind the tile, so that's got to get ripped out. Whenever we had our inspection done, they had spoken to us about needing to replace the AC unit shortly. That happened 2 months after we moved in. So replacing an entire AC unit in August or July, or August in Houston, Texas, right after I paid for closing costs, was not my idea of a good time. But it's over and it's done, so it's okay. The previous owners had put in some custom molding, and before we moved in, they repainted the whole house. They did carpets, they did new tile in the kitchen. So they took care of some of the more cosmetic stuff, but the big beefy ones that you just are supposed to take care of every 15 years on your home, those things are coming up. And so we got our house for a really good deal. We're comfortable making these changes. It's just, it's a pandemic, y'all. So getting workmen and having them in your home, or the finances and stuff, like, we're just juggling some stuff on that. But my kitchen is done, and it's beautiful, and I'm so, so happy with it. So yeah, babe, if you're watching this, thanks so much for doing that. It really wasn't a very hard job. I think what was the hardest part was the waiting, because you would prime and it has to cure for 24 hours. And then you put on your first coat of paint, and that has to sit for 12 hours. And then you have to flip it over, like cabinet doors, you have to flip them over and do the back. And you go for another 12 hours, And so I guess if we had just gotten up and done the first coat of paint at 7 in the morning and done the second coat of paint at 7 at night, we probably could have halved our time. But I didn't. My husband and I are both the kinds of people where if I have a project, I have to get to what I consider to be a stopping point. So for me, I have to get through the whole body of a sweater to the armholes, or I have to get through the whole yoke, or I have to get through a whole sleeve before I'm like, this is a good stopping point. Like that's not that's a natural stopping point to me, whereas most people can just pick it up and put it down. I have a harder time with that. We both have a hard time with that, and we both forget to eat, and we don't, in a bit, Hector gets put off, or he gets told, go do this and go entertain yourself for, you look down and you're like, 8 hours has gone by, and we didn't want to do that. So we spent a couple of hours every day throwing a coat of paint on and laying it out and then walking away from it. So my house was kind of disheveled for a couple of weeks, but everything is back to normal and everything is better now, and I'm super happy. Perfectly in time for my birthday. It was wonderful. As a little added bonus, my husband bought me an espresso maker for my birthday. It's for both of us. It's for the house. It just kind of happened to coincide on my birthday and I really wanted one. So we did that. So now I have all the coffee, which is fantastic. And I feel like maybe I should have a whole bunch more of. If there are really weird editing scenes in here or little choppy clips, I'm really sorry for that. I've got a case of the yawns and I'm just not kicking it. But I really wanted to record. I really wanted to chat with you guys. So, I did have something that I kind of wanted to talk about to you guys. And I was watching a podcast. I don't remember who I was watching, and even if I did, I wouldn't say it because I don't want to ball anybody out. But I watched a podcast that kicked off this train of thought because I have seen it on a lot of podcasts, and so I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. And I feel like if you've been watching my podcast for a while, I feel like I hope that I express that I feel like there is a moral and ethical responsibility to share knowledge in crafting and in knitting. I'm really hesitant to start to say community. I feel like community is getting thrown around in a lot of ways that it doesn't necessarily apply. But I think in this respect, I could say community. I think if you're a crafter or a knitter and you come here for knowledge, or you come here for wisdom or advice, or you come here just for camaraderie, I feel like the experience that I have should benefit the next person down the line, whether you happen to be younger than me, whether you're older than me, whether you have more experience than I do, less experience than I do, whether you've never knit a sweater, you've knit 50 sweaters, you knit 25 sweaters last year like I did. I feel like we should learn from one another. And something that I have found on a lot of podcasts that kind of makes me cringe, to be honest, is this idea that knitters will start a garment in particular. Garments in particular are what I'm talking about. It can happen with cowls and hats and accessories and stuff too, absolutely. But I feel like garments is the big one. I feel like I've been running into a lot of podcasts where I'm watching the knitter and they are discussing the garment that they're knitting, and they are saying, they are surprised by the result that they're getting, let's say. And I feel like this is problematic in a couple of ways. The main one that really gets me is that gauge and knitting are not mysteries. Like, this is a very controllable thing. It just means checking behind yourself a couple of times. And especially when you're a newer garment maker, I feel like that's something that you should be doing anyway, just to get into the practice of it. And I realize that it's tedious and it's not as much fun, but I would rather have like 5 seconds of tedium and know that my garment's going to fit me than knit an entire sweater and be surprised like that it doesn't fit. Like, that is not a fun experience to me. I've had that happen. Never bigger, unfortunately, but I've had it happen where my garment didn't come out, and it's only happened a couple of times to me. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, it happened to me one time, and that was pretty much like, okay, all right, well, I'm not doing that again, because what a waste of time and money and resources. And I've ripped it out and it's still sitting in a bag. Like, I had a sweater, it just didn't fit. And now I've ripped it out and it's sitting in a bag. And I am very fortunate, because of my sample knitting, that I have yarn that I would like to use. But because I sample knit, I don't have a lot of free time to knit my own stuff. So when I do, I want to be able to knit that. And that's hard to do when you've already knit something. You were excited about a yarn. For me, I was excited about a yarn. I purchased a yarn. I used the yarn, and I loved the project from the beginning to the end. Now, when I've knit it, I'm kind of over that color, or I'm over that yarn. I'm over that specific project. I want to do something different now. So to have to rip out a garment because I never wear it, and it's just, I don't know anybody that would wear it, or that, you know, style-wise or whatever, or it just didn't turn out. And now I have to go through this yarn, and now I have to knit it into something else again because now it's sitting here. And yes, I could destash it, I'm sure, but that's not always your fastest option sometimes. Or maybe you just really love it and you want to be able to knit it and you want it for you, right? Like, that's important. I think that how we view our yarn is important. So when I watch a podcaster knit a garment, size it up so that it will be loose, and then use an extremely drapey yarn, for example, like an alpaca or a blend, an alpaca silk blend maybe, or even a merino blend, you know. When I watch these people make this project, I have absolutely no problem with the fact that it didn't turn out. That happens to all of us as knitters. All of us as knitters. My problem is whenever this is not your first garment, it's not your fourth garment, it's not your 10th garment. Like, you are an experienced garment knitter, and this inconsistency is still happening to you. Now, I feel like it's irresponsible because I feel like whenever you're watching a podcast, I feel like it throws out the vibe of, oops, ha ha ha, that happens, no big deal, you know, and I feel like that's really, I remember being a new knitter and being intimidated by this journey I was about to go on over this garment. That's really cute to say now. I'm sorry. But you know, it's a big piece, you know, and it's kind of intimidating. And so I feel like for a new knitter to see a person that they're watching frequently and that they're enjoying frequently and they like their projects and they're consistently seeing them get this problem, have this issue of, oh, well, I knit this sweater and I did this because I wanted it to do that and I wanted it to do this and I picked this yarn so it would have this effect. But then it's like, I wanted it, but I got too much of what I wanted and now it doesn't fit. Does that make sense? I feel like that's really irresponsible because I feel like it makes new knitters, it reinforces the idea to a newer knitter that, well, this is just something that happens. This is just something you have to deal with. And that is an absolute bald-faced lie. If your garments are not coming out, it is your gauge. End of story. That's all it is. It's just gauge. Gauge is solely dependent on how you knit. If your gauge is not meeting the pattern, change your needle size. If it's still not meeting the pattern, change your needle size. If it's still not meeting the pattern and you just cannot get it to work, or you just absolutely, you're getting the gauge, but I don't know, your fabric's bulletproof and you hate it, do some math. It is not hard math. There are so simple YouTube videos that can help you just understand where you're at. I hate to tell you guys this. You know I don't want to tell you this. Nobody wants to hear this. Your gauge swatch can't be this. Okay? And you can't do the thing where you knit across a couple of garter rows and you got the little garter edges, and I know it looks cute, but it is absolutely inaccurate. You cannot do that. That is not how a good sweater is made. That's not how a good garment is made. That's not how a good project is made. Patty Lyons, I will link it below, has a free tutorial about swatching. And she has a specific cast on that she uses that allows the fabric to move in the way the fabric is going to move. Now, she does tell you to knit a 6 to 8 inch gauge swatch. I know all of you are rolling your eyes. I know you're rolling your eyes. Hear me out. What if one time you knit a 6 to 8 inch gauge swatch? Just one time. And you used a middle ground yarn to what you always use. Like, I work a lot in fingering, okay? Maybe I shouldn't, my gauge swatch with this will be absolutely different than my gauge swatch in this. Completely different. My gauge in a rustic non-superwash yarn is completely different. If I were to knit the Redford Sweater, I think it's 23 stitches per 4 inches, I think. We'll round it to 24, okay? 24 stitches for every 4 inches. In this yarn, I am on a 5. 24 stitches in 4 inches in this yarn, I will be on a 4, maybe a 3. It just depends on the yarn. Some of them are a little bit thicker and some of them are finer. Something finer, I'll be on a 3. A lot of people knit their socks on 2s. I don't. I knit my socks on 0s. My gauge will be absolutely different. My row gauge, how fast I build, is completely different, okay? And especially because I like woolen spun, and woolen spun tends to come apart, I have to be a little bit more careful. And since I'm a looser knitter anyway, I run into that. I can afford to go up needle sizes with this yarn because it's plumper. So what if you know, I really love hand-dyed fingering weight yarn or commercial fingering weight yarn. That's my jam. What if you knit a 5-inch swatch? What if you just knit a square, knit a thing, a little panel, you know, you could turn it into a blanket, like a little dolly blanket later. You could probably turn it, and depending on how wide you made it, you could turn it like sideways and make it into a hat and then like do some crown decreases or something. You could do something with it. But what if you took your favorite yarns? My favorite yarns are superwash merino, fingering weights, hand-dyed yarn, and a woolen spun rustic fingering weight yarn. And what if I made a 6-inch panel of fabric from both of these and then counted my gauge? Now, I might not always get the same gauge with every fingering weight yarn, but it's a really good generic basis. It's a really good way for you to see where you're at. It is a fantastic way for you to see what your gauge looks like on the first row of a project versus 4 inches later in the center of a panel. Your edges are almost always going to be tighter. Your bottoms are almost always going to be tighter because you have less to hold on to. So that makes your stitches a little bit tighter. You tend to be more conscientious of that fact than you are whenever you get to the middle of the row and now you're being lazy. What if? I think that is the most empowering thing you can do for yourself as a newer garment knitter. Or as an experienced garment knitter. I don't care how long you've been knitting. I've been knitting for 5 years and I did this 6 months ago and I learned like so much about my knitting. I had no idea. It is a wonderful, wonderful technique. I highly recommend it. Her cast on is also fantastic if you want to do a textured swatch. So whenever they say you need this many stitches in X cable pattern, you are actually going to get a swatch that will lay flat. When you have the garter stitches on the sides, those control what your middle fabric is going to do. But your garment probably isn't going to have garter stitches on the sides. It's probably just going to be stockinette and round. Well, in the round is different than seaming is different. Usually not enough to change your gauge, but in the way that your stitches sit, it is going to be very different. So what if we stopped lying to ourselves and we just did it and found out what our gauge actually was and how much more empowering could that be? You know, I don't want anybody watching this podcast to ever think that it's just something that happens. That bad gauge or a poorly fitting garment is just going to sneak up on you. The elves are just going to make it happen or sprinkle some dust and suddenly that one's not going to work. And that is so not the way it works. I know that I get a lot of comments from you guys talking about how many I've knit, or wow, that one was really pretty, or I could never do something like that, or I'm so intimidated. And I'm begging you, I don't know how else to put this. I am begging you to put aside that fear because it can be done. And by all means, I have an open inbox, okay? You can email me, you can DM me, you can, whatever your question might be, you can ask me. And if I know the answer, I will try to help you. I'm not a professional knitter. I just happen to like sweaters. And so I knit a lot of them. So a lot of what I know is by experience. My biggest tip, other than the swatching, is to measure as you go and try it on. At no point should you look at your sweater at the end of it and be like, wow, I had no idea. Well, why not? Why didn't you know? Why didn't you check it after you finished? When you split for sleeves, why didn't you put it on? Why didn't you work out 4 inches of your yoke and then take a tape measure after the middle of it and say, does my color work look good? Or is this the right, am I getting the right distance from here to here? How is it that you've knit the body of a sweater from the bottom up and you didn't realize that you went 6 inches longer than you're supposed to? I get like kind of getting distracted and like you'll go like an inch or something because you're watching a movie or whatever. Like I get that. Or your sleeves are a little longer than you thought they'd be, or I get that. You know, you got distracted or were enjoying the process. But some of these ideas where I wanted an oversized sweater and I knit it a size up and I knit it out of the super drapey yarn to get the effect that I wanted, and then I put it on and it was like a bag. Well, it didn't just become a bag whenever you finished it. Like it was a bag long before that. And you knew it was a bag. You knew it was a bag. Be honest about your measurements. Measure yourself so that you know where you stand. And I get like some people just don't know about fit. Oh, I thought I wanted 8. You know, the pattern called for 12 inches of positive ease. I knit to the pattern. That's way too much. I don't do 12 inches of positive ease ever. I think 5 is my max. And you're going to have a garment sometimes where you might be like, yeah, no. But very rarely did you have to put sleeves on it? You could have put the body of the sweater on and been like, nope, looks like a garbage bag. Sleeves aren't going to make it look less like a garbage bag. It looks like a garbage bag, you know? Don't make the mistake of thinking this will be fine. Like you check your work. I know that in school that was the last thing you ever wanted to do, but you didn't get to wear school home and out to parties and have people talk to you about it. Like your handmade garment is supposed to be for you. And if in my head, if that means that you are willing to spend 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 8 weeks knitting this garment, you should be willing to spend 3, 5, 8 minutes during the construction to verify that it is what you want it to be. Please check behind yourselves. I find my rustic yarns, my brioche, very loose. Very loose. Lace, loose. Texture, cables, that brings your fabric in, you know? It will come back out. It will wear with you, but like that's why you put ribbing on socks, is to bring it in and then to have it move. Cables do the same thing. They bring it in. Blocking. Blocking is so super, super important for your knitting. And I know that everybody talks about blocking, so I'm not going to go super deep into it. I run lukewarm water. Some people use really hot water. Some people use really cold water. The important thing is the temperature of the water is less important than the idea that you don't move it around a lot, especially if it's not superwash, okay? A lukewarm water or a cool water will make sure that you don't create any heat bleeding from your dyes. If you're using a solid color and you don't mind if it bleeds a little bit, you're trying to get rid of the excess or you're concerned about it and you want to use a little bit of warm water and it's your only object in, then by all means knock yourself out. But if you have a red sweater with white color work, you might not want to use warm water or you might want to use cold water. I think wool wash is a give or take. Like, I don't think you need it. For blocking, you do not need it. It's a nice thing if you want it, but you do not need it. Put your water in your tub or in your bucket or in your sink, okay? Lukewarm. Submerge your knits. Just push down gently, shove them in. Let them go. Let them sit for 20 minutes or so. Wool is naturally water repellent. It's going to take a little while for this to soak in. Let it do its job. Come back, pull the plug on the drain. Let your knitwear sit in the sink or in the bucket. In the sink, if there's a sink. If you can move it to the side so it doesn't get caught in the drain and it can just sit there, though some of the water that it has in it will naturally drain out. When it's done, push it down and let the water come out. Do not pick up your knitting and let all of your fabric hang there and stretch. And do not pick up your knitting and squeeze and wring it tight. Don't do that. Just push gently and let it be. Get yourself a towel, put it on your floor, on your counter, lift up your big mass of wool and knitting. You know, we don't want to do this. You don't want this. So bring it up in a nice little packet, put it on your towel, gently spread it out. Don't pull, just spread it out a little bit. Take your towel and roll your knitting into your towel, okay? When you're done with that, push it or step on it or whatever it is that you need to do. Take it to your yarn room or your craft room or your queen size guest bed and lock the cats out of the room. Put it on your blocking surface. Do not put it on your blocking surface, and then start to put it out to the measurements that you want. Take your tape measure with you. Take the schematic of your pattern with you. Get the measurement that you want. If you need to pin it, pin it. But blocking is simply laying it flat. This is not blocking. This is stretching. In some cases, your knitwear can do that. In some cases, it will. But please remember that knitting will always stretch farther this way than it will this way, because that's the nature of row gauge. So you need to try to be where you need it, I think that the biggest problem that knitters, especially newer knitters, have is that they end up playing yarn chicken. And I know that it's not always financially feasible for everybody, or sometimes you have something that was deep in stash, but if you can, it is always better to be safe than sorry. And a lot of yarn stores have a return policy. So if you are unsure, you're newer and you are so unsure and you just absolutely don't know, or you're right on the cusp, go ahead and get that extra skein of yarn. Don't cake it up. Just keep it. And if you don't need it and the label is intact and you didn't use it, a lot of yarn stores will allow you to send it back and return it. Double check on your return policy, but a lot of them let you do that. Now you've laid out your knitwear, it's laid flat, everything is fine. Turn a fan on, or close the door, or open the window, or whatever it is. Leave it alone and let it dry. And then come back and you will have a blocked and perfectly ready to go garment. If you have a a washer that has a spin cycle where it does not add water, all it does is spin. Very, very, very important. You can take your sopping wet mass of wool and you can put it in your dryer or your washer nicely, and you can hit the spin cycle and it will just like squeegee the water out for you. That will make your knitwear dry faster. If you do not have this cycle, or if you are unsure if you have this cycle, please don't do it. Please don't do it, because when you add water and then the spinning, you will create agitation. And especially if you are using a rustic wool that is not superwash, you will felt it. If it does not say superwash, keep it away from your machine unless you know for sure that your machine can do it. A lot of people, Ellie from Skein use nothing but non-superwash wool for pretty much almost everything. And she runs it in a wool cycle on her washer. Like, she puts it in her washing machine. It can be done. It has to do with the amount of agitation that your washer is going to put in, and it has to do with the temperature of your water. Watch some YouTube videos before you make that decision. If you're unsure, just do it the basic way and use your kitchen sink. That's my high horse about gauge. And blocking. If you have any gauge or blocking questions, or just sweater knitting questions in general, feel free to pop them below. Like I said, my DMs are open. Feel free. Like, I'm available. Y'all have that. And I'm perfectly happy to help. I want you to have successful garments. And since I don't design patterns, that's not a sponsored plug. That's just me wanting to be nice to you. I think that we have a responsibility to share what we know. And I don't know, it's just a pet peeve I have. I have no problem with the fact that you're a knitter and you're learning, or you're a knitter and you created and it didn't turn out the way you wanted. But I think that there are some mistakes, things that are called mistakes that are not mistakes. That's what you knit. That was done on purpose. You chose these things. You went up a size. You picked that drapey yarn. You picked that pattern because it was oversized. You did these things to get a result. But then whenever you got the result, you didn't want it anymore. But there were things you could have done along the way to make sure that the result you thought you wanted was the one you were going to get. And that's all I'm saying. I just feel like I have seen a lot of people creating garments lately who seem to be surprised, like something snuck up and swapped out their project overnight when they weren't looking, and like that's not what happens, and it's not how it works. Your knitting is absolutely under your control. So if you are newer, or if you are getting into garment knitting, or you're concerned about garment knitting, please, please, please know that there is not this feeling that is being perpetuated, this idea that's being perpetuated of, oh, haha, that happens sometimes. That's false. That is absolute falsehood. It does not need to happen, and there are plenty of ways to ensure that it doesn't. Please feel free to ask, or to look up some of these teachers. Patty Lyons has an amazing, amazing repertoire, library of garment knitting, and she also does knit-alongs where she designs a pattern and she knits with you over the course of a few weeks and teaches you everything you need to know. And if you can, that might be a really great thing for you to spring for, just once. Be able to say you did it, know what you're doing. Or to take that class or that Craftsy class on, use your free trial for Craftsy or Skillshare, and watch that video on maths or gauge, or math for gauge, or introduction to gauge, or whatever it is, math for, what's that called when you change, grading. There are plenty of classes about this, and some of them are free or can be free if you know where to look. So if you need anything like that, please ask and I will see what I can do to help you out. Yeah, I want to share one more thing with you. And it is a gift that my husband got me for my birthday. And it's this little deal. This is a Canon Ivy. Now, there are plenty of brands for, I think I found one that had really, really great reviews for like $35. I think it was called like Life Photo, maybe. Anyway, this is a mini printer and it is Bluetooth enabled. And so what you do is you pair your phone to it one time. You do not have to pair your phone to it every time that you print. You do not have to plug your phone into it to print. But what it does is it's an inkless mini printer, and it prints out these little 3-inch by 2.5-inch photos from your phone. Now, the way that mine works is I have paired my phone to it. So what I do is I make sure that my printer is turned on. I make sure that my Bluetooth is on my phone. They do not pair together or connect like it would to a Bluetooth headset or to your stereo or anything like that. It just uses the Bluetooth to be able to find a printer it has paired with before. So if you and your friends have 3 of these in one room, I don't know how that would affect it. I don't know anybody else that has one. But I still think it would be okay because it would be paired to your specific model. And it creates these little pictures. Sorry, I'm trying to find one. Yeah, it creates these little pictures. And then you can just stick them wherever you want. I have chosen to stick them into this book. This was a sketchbook that I brought my husband when we first got together, so probably 5.5 years ago. Oh, I lost a sticker. Anyway, the stickers, by the way, are from Katie's Canvases. It's KTS Canvas on Instagram, and she does hand painting, and she creates her own artwork for stickers or whatever, and these are some of hers. But I bought this sketchbook for my husband when we first got together about 5-6 years ago, something like that, and it has floated around the house pretty much almost all of our marriage. And so I finally stole it because I felt like I was watching Sandy by the Lakeside. I was watching her Vlogmas, like some of her past Vlogmases, because this is what I do. And she talks all the time about journaling and art journaling. And she went to a meetup with some friends in one of her previous Vlogmas years. And one of the ladies like watercolors her pages and sets up stickers in it and everything. She sets up a spread and then writes in it. And I had never thought about that before. I'm not really much of a writer or a journaler. I'm 35. I think I had a diary once when I was 8 and I wrote in it 3 times and then never picked it back up. I'm not one of those people who does that. But this has been a really weird year. And the last couple of days, like the day before my birthday, I found out some stuff about my family that I was unaware of, and I just kind of needed a place to, not like, I had an uncle for a serial killer or anything like that. Nothing like that. Just statuses. Like one of my cousins got married and I didn't know that. And another one had a baby and I didn't know that. And like, why do I not know these things? Who am I not talking to, right? So you know, it was just really kind of surprising. And so I kind of needed a place to put those thoughts. And so I've just kind of been picking it up. You know, it was really good for some of the anxiety around inauguration, and it was great to be able to write that down. I'm terrible about taking pictures when I do things. I'm always one of those people, I'm in the moment, and I never think that, hey, later I might want to revisit this. I never do that. I'm very fortunate that the people in my life think about those things. But one of the things that I love so much about doing Vlogmas myself this year was that daily, intentional presence of mind to look at what you were doing and to record it, remember it. Even if I didn't actually film it, or if I didn't make it into a video, like I have footage of it, or I thought about getting footage of it. And so therefore now it's more printed on my memory, I guess. And so I wanted this setup to see if I would continue that. And I figured that if I didn't like the printer and I didn't like doing it, my son would love that printer. And maybe he would want to keep a little book or something. So I figured that either way it wasn't a waste. But that's kind of my thing, and I have picked it up, and I'm not gonna get super into it. I don't think I'll be one of those people with the washi tape and the big kit and all of the stationery and the journaling and the scrapbooking. I don't think I'll be one of those people, but it is really nice to have a place just to jot down some thoughts at the end of the day, you know. And I don't write in the Dear Diary today. I don't write in that kind of style or voice, so it helps make it a lot more adult and a lot more approachable for me. So, yeah, I think that's all I've got. I'm sorry for everything being a little bit off. It's kind of an off day, but I really wanted to chat with you guys. I wanted to make sure that I got a podcast up. So, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I will absolutely have a finished sweater for you next time. And depending on, you know, some other stuff, maybe I'll have a second project for you as well. So I will talk to you soon. And I hope that your January has not felt like a million years. I was looking at Instagram. I follow, I think it's Coast to Coast Wools, maybe. But she had posted up a book that she had read, and it said 1,000 Doors in January. And I read it as 1,000 Years in January, and I thought it was the most relatable book title I'd ever seen. So this month has simultaneously felt like 1,000 years and about 4 seconds, as it usually does. So if January and February is a slog for you like it is for me, right there with you, and may we both get through it. So I am going to go make myself a coffee and find out what my boys are doing, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.